let's now look at comparative statics. So comparative statics are, we're going to use our diagram to think about how behavior of the firm changes when we change the price of an output or the price of that variable input. So we can use our diagram that we just kind of drew out, our max criteria that we talked about algebraically, to look at firm behavior when output price changes or the price of input 1 changes. So let's look at both of these in kind of isolation here. So maybe I'll try to split them up, and maybe this board's big enough now to do that. So let's imagine that the price of input 1 increases. So W1 increases to W1 prime. Okay, let's draw out our diagram here. So this is the amount of X1. This is output. Here's this production function that we have. F of X1 and X2 is fixed. And let's say we originally had some isoprofit line, let's say that looked like this. Remember, the slope of this is W1 over P. And let's think about what's going to happen. So originally, wherever this tangency point is how much X1 we should be using, how much of input 1 we should be using. Remember, the criteria was W1 over P is the marginal product of good 1. So that was kind of the criteria for figuring this out, right? That's where these two lines are tangent. Well, let's think about what happens when P changes. Sorry, when a W changes. Well, W is getting bigger. What's happening is the slope of these isoprofit lines is getting steeper, right? If this numerator gets bigger, then we're going to have another isoprofit line is now going to look like this, where the slope is W1 prime over P. And then what's going to happen is we're going to have a new amount of this input we should use. So in this case, when the price of that input goes up, we start using less of it. And our production is going to go down too. We can see the output here is also going to go down. So that's what's going to happen when we increase the price of this input 1, this variable input. We're going to change the slope of these isoprofit lines, and so this tangency point is going to change. And we're going to use less of, I mean, it kind of makes sense intuitively, right? We're going to use less of this input as it gets more expensive. We can also think about what happens when the price changes. This is in the capital pen here. So let's look. So this was this first one. Let's look at the price of output. Goes up. So P increases to P prime, for instance. It's going to be a very similar analysis, just going to be kind of the opposite way. So we can draw our diagram again. We have output up here. So Y is up here, which we're producing on the Y-axis. X1 is on our X. Here's our production function, might look something like this, f of X1, X2 bar. Let's say we're originally optimally at this point. I just draw really thick lines when I need a tangency point. Let's say we're originally at this line right here, X1 star. So that's the place where this condition holds. Remember, the slope of this is W1 over P. and this is some ISO profit line. Well, what happens if if the price of the output gets bigger, if P gets bigger here? Well, that's going to make the slope flatter, right? If P gets bigger, holding W constant. And so all of a sudden, our ISO profit line should be a straight line. Just hard to draw them sometimes. X1 star star. Our new tangency point is going to be out here. It's going to change the slope of this line. So remember, the slope of this ISO profit line is W1 over P prime. If P prime is bigger than P, it's going to be a flatter slope to this ISO profit line. And so we're going to get on the highest ISO, we're going to get the highest profit by being on this ISO profit line rather than any one below. And that's going to require us using more of this input one. And you can see also that output went up here. So we're producing more. You could, again, look at the condition and kind of see that's going to be true, right? Okay, so notice that if we change the price of input number 2, that fixed input, that's not going to change anything. We're still going to use the same amount of input 1 that we're using before. All it's doing is it's kind of lowering our profit level, but it's not going to change how much of our input 1 we use. It's not going to change how much input 2 we use either, right? Because that's fixed. All it's going to do is kind of lower our profits directly.